Kia's hands shook as she gripped the heirloom necklace, its weight a cruel reminder of the past she couldn't hold on to. But the sharp, gut-wrenching cry of her baby, louder now, more desperate, yanked her back to the present. His tiny body writhed in the next room, his hunger raw and unrelenting. The sound of his cry, strained and fragile, pierced through her like a dagger, each wail a painful reminder of everything she couldn't give him. It was the sound of need. I welcome you to today's story. Brace yourselves for a tale of lost connections, desperate decisions, and the heartbreaking hunger that drives us all. Kaya stood outside the bodega, rain tapping rhythmically against the glass behind her. The weight of the world seemed to hang in the cold air, thick and suffocating. The quiet of the neighborhood only deepened the silence in her heart. She could hear the occasional hum of a passing car, the low drone of the store owner in the back, and the soft drip of water from the awning above, but they all felt distant, like sounds from a world she no longer belonged to. In her hand, the gold heirloom necklace gleamed faintly, its smooth surface cool to the touch. The chain had always felt light before, a symbol of continuity, something that had been handed down through the generations, something that connected her to a past that was still alive in her grandmother's memory. But today that connection seemed fragile, like a thread about to snap. The delicate curves of the gold felt heavier than they ever had before, as if the weight of her decisions, of what she had to do now, was somehow embedded in the chain itself. Her fingers shook as she traced the pendant, a symbol of her family's love, of a history that once seemed stable and unwavering. But now that history seemed like a distant dream, one that was fading from her grasp. Her baby's cries rang in her ears, sharper now, desperate and full of need. The sound twisted in her chest. It had been hours since she had fed him. The last bit of milk she had was long gone, and now, with no money, no resources, the hunger in his cries was a reminder of just how far she had fallen. The apartment where they lived was small, cramped, and dark, the walls pressing in on her with every step. It hadn't always been like this. There had been times, fleeting as they were, when she could manage. But now the money was gone, and she had nothing left to give him. Rent was overdue. Her phone had been shut off days ago, and milk? Milk was a luxury she simply couldn't afford. She had spent the last few days scrounging for food, hoping there would be enough. But every trip to the corner store had left her empty-handed. She had no family to turn to, no friends who could help. The silence in the apartment was a constant reminder of her isolation, of how the world had turned its back on her. She looked back at the bodega one last time, the door still ajar, the low murmur of the store owner's movements in the background. It all seemed so distant, like another world, a world where people had enough, a world where things weren't as hard as they were for her. Her shoes, worn thin from the miles she'd walked, pressed against the wet pavement as she turned away. The cold wind bit at her skin as if reminding her how little she had left. No warmth, no comfort, only the harsh reality of survival. The necklace, once a treasure she had sworn to keep, now felt like a burden. It was something she couldn't afford to keep. The gold gleamed faintly in her hand, almost mocking her. She had always prided herself on the traditions that tied her to her family, on holding on to the past in a world that demanded constant change. But the future was no longer something she could ignore. Her baby needed her. Her baby needed food, warmth, and love. And if selling this necklace was the only way she could give him that, then so be it. It broke her heart to think about it, but she had no choice. Her heart ached with every step toward the pawn shop, but she forced herself to keep walking, to keep moving forward, even though the weight of her decision felt like a knife in her chest. The pawn shop door jingled softly as she entered, the sound nearly drowned out by the pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears. The air inside was warm, stale with the smell of old wood, dust, and the faint trace of something metallic. The dim light from a single overhead bulb cast long shadows over the cluttered shelves. Old clocks, tarnished silverware, broken picture frames, and trinkets long forgotten. It was the kind of place where things went to die, their worth stripped away by time, neglect, and the weight of desperate decisions. Behind the counter sat David, the jeweler, flipping through a catalog of old jewelry. The pawn shop was quiet, save for the faint hum of the dim lamp overhead and the soft rustle of paper as David flipped through his jewelry catalog. His eyes were narrow, focused on the worn pages, but his mind seemed distant, somewhere far away. The space around him was cluttered, filled with the smell of dust and old furniture, the kind of place where time seemed to slow. Kia stepped inside, her breath catching as the bells above the door jingled softly, signaling her presence. She hesitated for a moment, just inside the door, before slowly walking toward the counter. She placed the necklace on the counter with a quiet, painful sigh. The gold gleamed in the low light, catching her eye as if mocking her decision. She felt a lump form in her throat as her fingers lingered on the chain, reluctant to part with it. But she had no other choice. Her baby needed milk. The baby, the future, was her priority now. David's eyes flickered up to meet hers, his sharp gaze catching her like a hook. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. There was something about the way he looked at her that sent a shiver down her spine. "I need to sell this," she said, her voice low but steady, betraying none of the desperation twisting inside her. "It's for my baby. I don't have any other choice." David's fingers hovered over the necklace, his eyes scanning it closely as if examining something far beyond its surface. His fingers brushed the smooth gold gently, and for a brief second, something in his gaze shifted, a subtle flicker of recognition, though it quickly vanished behind a neutral expression. He turned the pendant over in his hands, the chain slipping through his fingers with a quiet metallic whisper. The moment seemed to stretch, the air thick with silence as his mind clearly wandered to places he wasn't ready to share. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely a whisper, almost as if speaking to himself more than to her. Kaya felt a sudden flutter in her chest. She swallowed hard, trying to push down the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "It's been in my family for generations," she replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled as she clasped them together. "My grandmother passed it down to me." David's face softened slightly, and for a moment, he seemed to drift off, his eyes unfocused as if he were lost in a memory. His fingers slowed, still turning the necklace, his expression growing distant, almost wistful. His lips parted as though he was about to speak, but then he muttered to himself, "This necklace, I know it." Kaya's chest tightened, her heart beating faster. Her breath came out shallow as confusion clouded her thoughts. She had never felt this uncertain before, not with something so simple as an heirloom. The necklace had always been a connection to her grandmother, to the love and history that ran through her family, but now as she looked at David, that connection seemed suddenly frail. "What do you mean?" Kia asked, her voice thick with disbelief. "It's my family's." The words tumbled out of her, desperate for some kind of reassurance. There had to be some explanation. This couldn't be happening. David's eyes softened, and his voice cracked with emotion. "I knew your grandmother, and I." He stopped, his words halting in his throat. The air in the shop seemed to freeze as his eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of regret and something deeper, something Kia couldn't name. He opened his mouth as though to explain further, but then the words that followed hit her like a sudden storm. "I'm your father." The words were simple, yet they rocked her to the core. Her world spun, everything around her becoming a blur. The words sank in slowly, like a heavy stone sinking to the bottom of a river, and Kia could barely breathe. Her head was spinning, trying to process what had just been said. Her mouth went dry. She shook her head, struggling to hold on to some semblance of reality. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, that's not possible." She stepped back, her heart pounding, her thoughts racing as the room seemed to close in on her. "My mother never said anything about you." Kia's mind reeled as David's words sank in. Her knees felt weak, as if the very ground beneath her had crumbled away. She staggered back, the world tilting around her. The pawn shop, once a place of indifferent transactions, now felt suffocating, like a tomb of heavy silence and shattered expectations. The soft tap of rain against the windows outside was the only sound, but it seemed so distant, as though the world beyond the shop no longer existed. David's eyes, those eyes, sharp and full of life just moments ago, now appeared aged, haunted by years of unspoken grief. His hand shook as he placed the necklace back on the counter, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. Kia could barely breathe. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than her thoughts, and the words she wanted to say seemed to get lost somewhere between her throat and her mind. "No," she whispered again, shaking her head, the disbelief thick in her voice. "That's not possible. My mother never said anything about you." David's face crumpled. The tears, long held back, welled up in his eyes, and he blinked them away quickly. His jaw clenched as if he were fighting for control, trying to keep himself together long enough to explain. But the weight of his past was too much, and the walls around him seemed to crack under the strain. "I was an officer," he said softly, his voice shaking with a vulnerability Kia had never expected. "A young man when I was taken to fight in the war. I had no choice. I was gone for years. I never wanted to leave, but I had to. When I came back, your mother was gone. The town had flooded. There was no trace of anyone, nothing left." His voice broke on the last word, the cracks in his facade too deep to hide. The intensity in his eyes faltered as if he was seeing something beyond the pawn shop walls, something distant, something painful. "I searched, Kia. I searched for you both for years." His voice was barely a whisper now, carrying the weight of his regret, his sorrow. "I never gave up hope, but I couldn't find you. The flood swept everything away, homes, families, memories." Kaya's head swam, her breath hitched as she tried to grasp what he was saying. The pain in his voice was too real, too raw to ignore, but the emotional storm inside her was too great. Her chest tightened with anger, sorrow, and confusion, the weight of a lifetime of unanswered questions and lost years crashing down on her. She staggered backward, the room spinning, and she could feel the tension in her body rising. Her muscles taut, her hands clenched. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Her voice cracked, and she hated the tremble in it. She wished she could scream, demand answers. She had so many questions, so much anger. But the hurt of a lifetime broke through, and she couldn't hold it back anymore. The years she had spent wondering about her father, the longing, the emptiness. David's breath caught as he met her gaze. The tears that had been threatening to fall now escaped, rolling down his cheeks like the floodwaters he spoke of. He sighed heavily, the weight of his own words too much to carry. "I didn't know where to start," he said quietly, his voice full of sorrow. "Your mother, she wanted nothing to do with me after I left. She left, and when I came back, I couldn't find you. I searched the wreckage, the town, the people. Everything had changed. The world had changed, and I couldn't find you. I thought I lost you both forever." Kaya's heart ached with the weight of his words. The flood had washed away not just homes, but lives, her life, his life, the life they could have shared. Kia clutched the necklace tightly, the gold reflecting the dim light like a faint, aching glow. It was heavier in her palm now, not just a simple heirloom, but a piece of the past she never truly knew, a lifeline to a family torn apart by years, by war, by flood. For a moment, everything stood still, as if the world outside the pawn shop had faded away, leaving only her and David in this space of unresolved emotions. The rain outside had finally stopped, but inside, the storm raged on, swirling between them with unspoken words, lingering regrets, and an uncertain future. She stared at her father, seeing a stranger, yet somehow he was familiar, a man whose presence in her life had been a mystery until now. His face held the echoes of a past she could never fully understand, a life she had never known, but still longed for. The necklace, once a symbol of love and continuity, now felt like the only tether to that distant past, a connection to a family that had been lost in time. But all of that seemed distant now. Her baby's cries echoed in her mind, the harsh reminder of her present reality. The sound of need, the hunger that clawed at her child, pulled her back into the here and now. It reminded her why she came here in the first place. Her child needed milk. The survival of the future depended on her. Everything else, every pain, every lost moment, had to take a backseat to that. The weight of her decision pressed on her chest. She looked up at David, his pain mirroring her own. He opened his mouth, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've always loved you, Kia," he whispered, each word soaked in regret and longing. "I never wanted you to feel alone. I just didn't know how to come back." Kaya felt a tightness in her throat as a rush of emotions overwhelmed her. Anger, grief, confusion, and something else. Something she couldn't fully name. The years of loss, the life that could have been, flooded her in a wave too big to fight. She couldn't breathe for a moment, the air in the room thick with years of missed opportunities. Her voice broke as she demanded, "But why didn't you write? Why didn't you try sooner?" David's shoulders slumped as if the weight of her question had crushed him. "I didn't know where to start," he said softly, his voice full of defeat. He looked away for a moment, his gaze distant. "But when I heard you still had the necklace, I knew I had to try again. It's the only thing I could give you." The words sank in. Kia's gaze fell to the necklace in her hand. The weight of it seemed to shift in her palm. It wasn't just gold anymore. It was history. It was loss. It was everything she had never had. But now it was all she could give him. The gold gleamed faintly, a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. The past that had never been hers, the family she had always longed for, but now it was slipping away again, this time with a chance to begin anew. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Take it. It was meant to be yours all along." David's eyes filled with tears as he reached out, his trembling hands slowly taking the necklace from her. His fingers brushed hers, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The years of silence, the confusion, the pain, they all seemed to dissolve. There was no more time, no more past to mend. It was just the present, the now, the possibility of something new. Hope. Kaya stepped back, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. She turned toward the door, her heart heavy with a sense of finality. Her baby still needed milk, but now there was something else. Something she couldn't name. A quiet sense of closure. Her father was real. He wasn't just a shadow from her past, but a man with a history, a story of his own. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to rebuild what had been lost. Just as she turned to leave, David called out to her, his voice warm, inviting. "Kia," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Take some money for the milk, please, and I want to invite you tomorrow for a tea break. I'll be at the shop. You can come by, join me, we can talk. You could even work with us, become a seller here if you'd like. It's the least I can do." Kaya stopped at the door, her heart skipping a beat at the offer. It wasn't just about the money. It was an invitation, a chance to start something new, to build something from the ground up with the person who had once been a stranger. She felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark, that maybe this was the beginning of something better. She nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his. "I'll come by," she said quietly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'll see you tomorrow." Please give this video a like, subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that no matter how lost we feel, we're never truly alone. I'd love to know where you are watching from. Bye for now.